We're back.
Hi, Ryan. Thanks for joining me this morning. So, you're very knowledgeable about the ancient world, esoterica, and all sorts of other things, tarot, magic. How long have you been studying all this?
Ooh, that is probably like since I was about 15 years ago. I was going to give away my age then. Yeah, about 15 years ago. I think all my life I've studied this kind of stuff. I've always had an eye for the unusual and kind of supernatural things when I was a kid. Never forget a ghost book that I got that had all the different ghosts of the world and what they're up to. And it just, I don't know, it just fascinated me. Got a bit older, aliens. Every young man gets into aliens. And then I think as I got older and I became a professional video maker and graphic designer and a general kind of digital artist, I gravitated towards more sensible things, I would say. Even though a lot of this esoteric stuff is wild and crazy, most of it's analogy. So that ability for me to decode and process symbols was probably the my gateway, really. But it was films like The Matrix and things like that when I was younger as well. And esoterica
So, which
naturally finds its way into high art, really, doesn't it? So that was my touchstone.
which pill did you take then?
Both.
And the result was?
I'm here talking to you. I'm not sure if you're a hallucination or not, to be honest.
Well, who knows? So, when you said recently you were writing a book, what are you writing it about?
There's a question for you. I suppose the book's like a summary of all my esoteric puttings together, the connected dots. Specifically, I mean, I tried to write a book previously, but I just couldn't find like a central hub focus for it all. It's
Mm,
just there's just so many things here and there.
mm,
And then I was looking up the famous Sator square. Just I was studying tarot at the time, just trying to understand the symbols in that, like the deeper symbols, not the he'll love you on a Friday kind of symbols, but there's clearly other meanings in there. And so I was studying between the Wheel of Fortune tarot card, Eliphas Levi, who's a famous French occultist, stroke. He was a cleric as well. He was all kinds of things. Some of his artwork that informed later versions of the Wheel of Fortune, and the Sator Square, which was on this version of the Wheel of Fortune. And as I was up late at night, I think I'd been living in London and I'd just recently got back to the north, and I was researching the Sator Square, reading away on Wikipedia of all places, and it said that there's one in London, one in Manchester, because I'm trying to find context, you see, so I need to go and see one where it is and what's around it, and one 10 minutes away from where I was in literally the village next door to where I grew up. Now, I was the village next door to that. It was like,
really?
what? It was about
Yeah.
1 o'clock in the morning. So I jumped in the car and sped off to a graveyard in a church at the bottom of the Pennines. And there were these three pillars. One of them had the Sator square on it, and the other two had, and other symbols on that pillar. And the other two had just an array of things that looked intelligible, but when I returned the day after to have a good look at the daylight, were not. Now,
Okay.
I went and researched it a little bit, and they'd called them, they were called the Anderton stones, but they'd been related to the Templars, as all Sator squares are. For everybody out
Hmm.
there, a Sator square is just
Okay.
a five by five square that says Sator Aripo Tenet Opera Rotas, and you can read it in lots of different directions. Yeah, so I looked at it and I was just completely bewildered. And then over the next few years, I mean, it's taken me that long, the next few years, I realized that it was all related to exactly what I had been studying, and it provided a hub for me to base all base the book around and the knowledge. However, as these things go, my knowledge was incomplete, and it's taken me on a much deeper journey because all these symbols were together. It was just so lucky. I mean, there was even a wheel of fortune on the pillars. You know, that far. I'd been studying the wheel of fortune. Find the Sator square, and then on the pillars themselves, there's a wheel of fortune with clues. I will add.
So before I ask you more about the Sator square and the Wheel of Fortune, do you know what the significance of that particular cemetery was? Like, why would that particular one have such an unusual thing when it's only found elsewhere in the UK, in Manchester and London? Do you know the history behind it?
Yes. So one of the ones in London was here because of the Romans. It was a Roman thing. They found it in is it called I forget, next door to Pompeii. Basically, they found one next door to Pompeii.
Herculaneum, is it the other one?
Excuse me?
Do you mean Herculaneum, the other one, the other city?
I was going to say the Herculaneum, but I just couldn't. I didn't know I was correct. Yeah, with the Herculaneum. Yeah, and it's eventually got hold of by the Templars. This symbol. It's known as a Templar square as much as it's known as anything else. And these pillars are clearly Christian, but not quite. However, so the reason why they're in the churchyard is because they were dumped there. So the story goes, there was a chapel in the 1300s, so a long time ago, a chapel in the 1300s in this area. The actual village I was in was called Rivington. The village next door is called Anderton. These are the Anderton stones. There was an Anderton manor, and they'd had this little chapel house built.
Mm-hmm.
Now, bear in mind, the Templars were disbanded about 100 years before that. And I'm imagining there was some kind of fugitive Templar types, not saying definitely Templars, but those types. They've had this this chapel constructed, and on the walls they've given away, they've encoded all the secrets, but in such a manner that you can't help but know that it's not, you know, at a glance it looks Christian. Look a little deeper, it's like, this is just bizarre. These symbols are weird. And then when you think they must have had these symbols on their walls, they're definitely not just regular Christians. These, you know, these are the esoteric secrets. Particularly kind of, I would have thought that it'd have been to do with Masons, not the Masons, obviously they weren't around yet, but it's all to do with geometry and time and measure and distance and harmonics and things like this. So clearly Mason's knowledge, the Mason must have known it to put it in the stones in the first place, but
so
I don't know.
Do you think the Freemasons then, I mean, a lot of people would think this, but would you agree that the Freemasons' knowledge is somehow a continuation of Templar knowledge?
Yes. I would say that the Templar, it's almost certain that although the Masons really formed in like the 1700s, there's definitely a continuation. When we think Templars, we think knights on horsebacks, and it's like they had a whole retinue. For every one Templar knight, there have been 20 people. But they had Masons, they had clerics, they had accountants, they had bankers, they had all kinds of stuff going on. So we know that the Templar attachment Masons built the cathedrals all around Europe. So and had this knowledge, and had been in Jerusalem and Egypt, and you know, and in Greece and all these kind of places, Carthage. So if there's an ancient world knowledge, I mean, it had been over here too, but the Romans had pretty much wiped it out with the Druids. You know, the Druids were famed, it seems, to be the place to go to learn all this stuff. There's tales of Egyptians going to England to go and learn it from the Druids. So
do you think this, even though there's a kind of a broken connection historically on the surface between, say, the Templars and then moving forward in time and the Freemasons and then going back in time to the Druids, and there's some kind of connection, even though there's a broken connection in terms of knowledge?
Yes, in terms of knowledge, I'd say they're all sharing the same knowledge. Yeah, and it as far as broken connections go, frankly, it looks like it goes to the Stone Age to me, certainly to the Bronze Age. I mean, yes, I've found evidence it goes back to the Stone Age, which is the pinnacle of my book.
And so what about those symbols then on the stones?
Oh, so for example, I talked about this Christian veneer. So we've got the Sator square. You see, these are ruined pillars and they're only knee high. So there's they're kind of missing a lot of context, and I can only imagine what was on the other pillars, or on the other walls. So there's a Sator square. Above that Sator square is the IHS that you might know from a lot of Christian symbolism. IHS with a little cross through the H. And then next to that, there's a chubby looking God character, but he seems to be sticking his tongue out like that. Either that or he's got some weird Shakespearean beard. But these pillars are, they're from the 1300s and they've been outside a long while. Oh, I didn't get down to why they're in the graveyard. There was a chapel there. It eventually got knocked down. Somebody had been using the stones in their garden, and the people at the church said, could you please return the holy stones? So they all ended up back in this churchyard. So it was recognized by the church there was something important about these stones, even though now they're left to ruin outside. I'm going to talk to, I live in Preston now, and it's within the diocese. It's within the county of Preston. So I'm going to go to the museum and have a talk to them, because they have some similar stones in Preston Museum, and I'd like to just go and show them like what they've actually got. Because even on the stone that they got in the museum, there's clearly a pyramid on it. It's carved to the same dimensions as the pyramid. So, I mean, literally exactly the same dimensions. So, where was I? Sorry?
The symbols.
Do you remember?
Or the chapel.
Where was I? Sorry?
You were either telling me about the chapel or you were going to tell me about the symbols.
The symbols, that's right. Okay, so there's this God character sticking his tongue out. He's holding a globus cruciger, like an orb, like the king's orb, and he's holding a scepter as well. Perfectly fine symbols of rulership. But he just doesn't look like you draw God. He just looks like a 30-something-year-old man that's put on a bit too much weight, sticking his tongue out with a bloody ruler and a sphere.
Yeah.
So, and he stood above a Sator square. So straight away, even on the night that I first got down there, within the IHS, I could see the symbol for Saturn clearly in there, which is like an H, with a little cross through the upper leg, the upper point. And I'm looking at this guy like, are you Saturn? Are you support? I mean, there are connections with Saturn and the Christian God anyway through El being the Canaanite Phoenician word for Saturn. And obviously you get the Elohim and things like that in the Bible.
Is this connected to the L that you have in the archangels' names as well? Is it the same L?
Yeah. Okay. Basically, Elohim is the name for the gods and the goddesses. There's like a plural right at the beginning of the Bible. So yeah. The Christian stroke Hebrew religious system is essentially just the pantheon with its bits cut off. You know what I mean? It's been neutered somewhat. It's not the gods, it's the angels. It's not this. It's just the same thing. So yeah, I'm getting suspicions that it's Saturn. I'll jump ahead a little and say that one of the things that made me know it was Saturn eventually was that the ruler he had in his hand was actually tilted to the same axis as the ecliptic goes around us. So like everybody out there, if you think the Earth is actually on a tilt, isn't it, compared to the rest of the solar system? Well, because these guys were geocentric, and as you see out at night in the sky, it looks like the planets are actually on that angle rather than us. Makes sense. So that angle is represented in his ruler, and obviously the globus cruciger is in itself an effigy of the Earth. So when I looked at lots of other Saturn symbols, especially the ones in Mithraism, which that Sator square is linked to, supposedly, I saw the same angle over and over and over again. And in the Sphinxes in Egypt and in Sumeria, Babylon, places like that. So this whole thing started to come together.
So this is the angle of the ruler in relation to some kind of axis within the sculpture.
Yeah, if you just think a vertical axis, and then off of that vertical axis is this
24 degrees or so. Is that right?
23.5 degrees. Very good. Yeah. So when I looked at the some of the Saturnian gods, when I say Saturnian, I kind of mean time. These time gods. Saturn's to do with time, death, father time. All these things. So I looked at some of the Mithraic gods, and it was there too. The one of the main Mithraic gods, Ion, whose name is in that Sator square. Literally, you can make a Templar cross in that Sator square, and it'll read out the word Ion over and over 4 times around the square. So Ion's also got kind of the idea of he's the globe, he's all these different forms of time, and he's got a ruler in his hand, sometimes a key, and that's of at 23.5 degrees as well. So I'm starting to get understandings here, and through spending a lot of years studying these things and really thinking about it, more than read other people's works, I've thought about it. I think is the reason why I've got so far. And yeah, you've got a question.
Would it not be just anything that's on the ecliptic in that case? So if the angle is to do with the ecliptic in terms of the axis of the Earth, would it not be any of the planets? Why particularly Saturn?
Oh yeah, it does relate to all the planets. Well, Saturn's the king of the planets, or certainly the old king of the planets. It's partially relating to the fact that I think that this old Stone Age religion, and Saturn was of the previous pantheon. He's one of the Titans. He's not a god. He's more like a law of physics. So, and the tool that Saturn uses to castrate his father, and he in turn gets castrated by, is a stone blade. So I think it's getting, and obviously he's the grandfather, he's the great one that came before. They get into previous civilizations, and really this whole thing is a quest for the Prisca Theologia, that original religion that everything developed from. And it seems that it was a pole star religion rather than a sun moon religion. And Saturn at that time was god of the poles, because that's where time spins out from. There's like a null hub at the center of that axial tilt, and the time spins out from it, and that's where Saturn lived.
That's so interesting. So do you think that then this could be connected to various asterisms or constellations that are to do with the circle of stars that periodically become the North Pole, celestial pole?
Yes. No, it totally is. Yeah, totally is that. Well,
With the Big Dipper.
Yeah. So I think if you bear in mind everything's the life force is symbolized by a serpent for many reasons, mostly because of duality reasons. There's like a yin and a yang to time, a beginning and end. So that suddenly becomes the Ouroboros serpent, which is essentially Draco that spins around the pole. Draco's the dragon constellation, spins around the pole. But he's in a figure 8. And that's because really there are two, this is a secret, really there are 2 poles. So there's the pole of the Earth, and there's that axial pole of the ecliptic from us. So both of these have different pole stars at different times, hence precession, the precession of the equinoxes. So that figure 8 that Draco's in is pretty much where all these pole stars go around in a kind of a dancing motion.
That's fantastic. So you've managed to make the connection. Basically, the most important evidence is that angle, the 23.44 degree angle, and then with the different characters, and then across the different religions, from your strange stones in your local cemetery to the Mithraic gods and the Saturn.
Most interestingly, the for me recently in the book was, and overall, is that it answers the riddle of the Sphinx. If everybody out there knows the riddle of the Sphinx, it's basically that Oedipus, some Greek dude, there's a Sphinx ravaging the land, as they usually do, and Oedipus meets this Sphinx, and famously what they do is ask you a riddle. If you can't answer the riddle, they devour you. So Oedipus is asked a riddle. It's not said what it is in the first place, but over time, a couple of questions and answers develop. The first question, the first version of this question is something like, there are 2 sisters, one gives birth to the other. What are they? And the answer is supposed to be day and night. So there's a yin yang to this again. There's a duality. The second version of the question is, what walks on 4 legs in the morning, 3 in the afternoon, sorry, two in the afternoon and 3 in the evening? The answer is man, because you crawl on 4 legs in the morning, run around on 2 in the afternoon of your life, and then you got a walking stick in the evening of your life, in the autumnal years. So both those questions are related to time. And for everyone to obsess over sphinxes, especially in the occult, you'll see, I mean, there's a sphinx on the Wheel of Fortune in the tarot. There's quite a few sphinxes in the tarot, actually. And, for it to be this big a deal throughout history, it's not going to be such a simple answer. You see the riddle of the Sphinx in alchemy. You see it all over the place. So a sphinx is a lion, a bull, an eagle, and a man mixed together. Those are the zodiacal signs of Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and exactly 4 directions. So the 4 equinoctial directions. Rather than point to the solstice, which would be like Aries, Libra, which would be vernal. No, those are the vernal equinoxes. No, so I'm talking nonsense. The lion, bull, eagle, and the man are actually the fixed signs of the zodiac and symbolize the 4 kind of quarters of the year. And the 4 seasons essentially at the greatest. Leo is the middle of summer. The August sun roars like a lion, kind of an idea.
Mm-hmm.
So there are other things going on here as well, like the fact that the Milky Way passes between Scorpio and Taurus. There's like a line where that it goes through the zodiac, and this is the path for souls and other mysterious esoteric stuff, which doesn't matter too much because there are a couple of secrets put together here. Right, so if I talk about the Wheel of Fortune, this is really cool. So the Wheel of Fortune card has a wheel in the middle that stands for the spinning wheel of the sky, and it has the lion, the bull, eagle, and a man around it. It has the name of God, Jehovah, Yod He Vav He, and it has the word T-A-R-O for tarot. Now I note that tarot is rota, Sator is rotas, so these are similar letters. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and also Sator Aripo Tenet Opera Rotas means on the surface something like the sower Aripo knows the works of the wheels of the Wheel of Fortune.
Okay.
So out there, if we know what gematria is, in the ancient world, they didn't have numbers as we have them. They used the letters. Simple. And when you can play around with the letters a little, convert them, and you get numbers out of letters. So the name of God, Jehovah, is 4 letters, 10, 5, 6, and 5. They add together to make 26. The lion, the bull, the eagle, and the man, when you add those together, they add to 26 as well if you take the position in the zodiac Taurus number 2.
If this is which language, through which language? Through
In Hebrew. Through Hebrew, Yod He Vav He is 26 equals 26. In just counting the zodiac, you get 26 out of it. Those 2 angles that we were talking about, the ecliptic and the Earth axis, they do a dance, and it ends up with a wobble and a backwards movement of the stars in the sky over 25,920 years, or 26,000 years. Okay. If you take the word T-A-R-O, tarot, and you just put the extra T on the end, and you do the gematria on it. So, you say tarot, read the word tarot as T-A-R-O-T. On this wheel, it was T-A-R-O, so it fits in the wheel. So you do the gematria on tarot, and it comes out to, it's either 25,920 or 638 or whatever it is for a precessional season. So remembering that the lion, the bull, the eagle, and the man are basically the 4 seasons. Well, this number either, I can't remember, it works out as a precessional year or a precessional season. So I'm like, I know what this card is. Excuse me.
Oh, I was going to say the 25,920 years would be the full cycle.
The full cycle of a precession, yeah. The full backwards precession of the zodiac through all those years. Basically, every year you wake up and look at the vernal equinox to see what year it is as far as the zodiac is concerned. You know, like we live in the edge of Pisces, stroke the edge of Aquarius now. So you'd expect to see Aries, Taurus there at the vernal equinox, stroke Aries, but it's not because this backwards movement. We're now in Pisces, about to enter into Aquarius. Is just the way it goes. So the name of God not only adds to 26, but it has these 4 numbers in it: 10, 5, 6, and 5. Realizing that's actually geometry, it makes a trapezium, which is something like a square, but 2 of the sides are brought in. So you got a side of 5 at the top, a side of 6 at the top, side of 5 at the bottom, and 2 sides of 5. So you just think of like a pyramid shape with a severe cap cut off. Yeah.
Okay.
This is the 2 angles on the side of that trapezium are the exact same angle as the axis of the Earth. Okay. Already, yes, mind blowing, eh? And when you put that trapezium over an image of the Sphinx, when you think of a Sphinx, apart from the one that's sat down in Egypt, when there's a Sphinx, the legs are like that. They're always like that. And in fact, if you look at a lot of ancient drawings, excuse me, they're like that. The legs. Look at anyone. Go and look at an image of a Sphinx. Well, that is the exact angle of the Earth and goes to this trapezium. So and you can see that in Babylon from right at the beginning.
Oh my God, I had no idea.
It's just mind blowing. I know, and I've got so many of these kind of secrets in this book. It's like I said, it's been years and years really hitting it. So, what do we get from there? Sorry, do you have a question?
No, I'm just enjoying the ride.
Yeah. So, what do we get from that? Everything put up. Let's go back to the Sator square first. Let's go back to the Sator square and apply this same gematria on the Sator square. Now, there's a bit of a caveat with this, in that because we're dealing with magicians and something a bit more secret, it's not such an easy translate. However, using the same system as I used to decode the word tarot, I decode the word Sator. What do I get from it? 25,920 again. In fact, I've got the actual calculation here. So if that's 25,920, tarot must be a precessional season.
Are we in Latin now? Is this the Latin letters?
What we're doing is still going for the Hebrew, but translating them through the Roman alphabet.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a little trickery here, but not much. Very simple. And I think the main trick that they're doing is in Hebrew and in Greek and in English even, there are several letters that sound the same. So in Hebrew, they have 2-letter T's, for example. They have tav at the end of the alphabet, and they have tet near the beginning of the alphabet. If you think they'd be using tav because of the word, and you know, we know the structure of words, and you can see similar alphabets using similar letters to construct the same word, and then it jumped to language. But most alphabets are based on the same Phoenician letters in the first place, so you can track what letter it should be. However, because it's magicians hiding things, they just go, well, we'll not use the tet, we'll use tav. So you're just swapping it. That's it. It's as simple as that. So you do a little bit of that. Sator, Aripol, Tenet work out as precessional numbers: 432, 25,920, and another one that augments it, 48. But you can forget about that. But they're much bigger numbers. They've got loads of zeros on the end and stuff, but they are these precessional numbers again. So there's also a Wheel of Fortune on these pillars, and it's got a 72 on there. Now, 72 years is the amount time it takes for precession to move 1 degree. So basically 360 times 72 is 25,920. When you look at the precession, when you divide that precessional year into 360, the magic happens. Days, weeks, fortnights, months, seasons, everything. It's all these beautiful harmonic numbers. And this is the main secret of all this esoterica from, I mean, I've been doing things, I do a podcast in America on a Sunday, most Sundays, And I mean, I don't go to America. The podcast is done from America. And we've been looking at Solomon. Everywhere I look, basically, I keep finding these same time numbers. When you think magic, you know, obviously there's another veneer of you know, the hiding things. The magicians, they're literally showing you one thing while doing another. And if you think about magic, it's all like you've got to be in sympathy with time. You've got to face a certain direction, time. You've got to be there at a certain time. There's got to be certain planets in the sky, certain zodiac signs up. It's certain times of the year. You know, it's all time stuff again. And when you look at the symbols, it's all time, all of it.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. Here's what I've been studying these last few weeks because I'm finishing up the book. I've been looking at how these harmonic numbers work. You'll know them from religious texts. 54, 72, 108, 144, 288, 216, 432, 25, 920, all these numbers that are derived from putting this precessional year into 360 degrees. So what do you get from that? Well, the platonic solids have interior angles that equal these numbers. The normal shapes have angles that equal these numbers. It's the amount of seconds in a day, the size of planets. It's literally the entire cosmos. And they're all based on these harmonic numbers. So what I've been doing these last couple of weeks, or this week particularly, these last 7 days, is trying to understand why the harmonics work and why they would use it in a particular way. That particular way is on the pillars. There are many images, and all of these images are drawn to a very special seven-sided geometry. Seven-sided shape's called heptagon. So it's very special seven-sided geometry, and that geometry, when it's stellated, i.e., like you think of a pentagon, you get a pentagram. That's a stellation. It looks like a star.
Okay.
You get a heptagon, it becomes a heptagram, stellated like a star. One of the angles in there is very, very, very close to being that 23.5 degrees doubled.
In the branch of the star.
Yes. It's like it's very close to being the angle of the Earth, basically. And I'm like, okay, there's that about it. And there's lots of other things about it. But one of them particularly is that. I also noted that, so anyway, that's that. So this seven-sided shape's all over the pillars, and it seems to be particularly displayed through the Wheel of Fortune. Normally, Wheels of Fortune have 8 spokes, something like that. This one has 7 in the middle and 14 around the outside. So I just did a few calculations. You know, you divide a circle by 7, you get a heptagon. Actually, this special shape I'm talking about isn't really a 7-sided shape. It's really a 14-sided shape. 7-sided is odd, so it's not very harmonic because you can't even divide by 2. 14-sided shape, harmonic, I can divide by 2. When you divide that year circle, that 360 degrees up by 14, or times it by 14, we're reminded that Osiris is cut into 14 pieces. If you times it by 14, you get 50/40, Plato's favorite number.
Right.
Oh, and one of these harmonic numbers. Yeah. When you divide it by 14, you get some other special things going on that are too complicated to explain on here. But again, that shape has this special angle in there. Not only is it close to that angle, it's close to the angle of a 3-4-5 triangle, the Pythagorean triangle. It's also close-ish to a Pythagorean square root of 2 triangle. It's also close to, as we said, that angle of the Earth. It's also close to a triangle made from Euler's constant. It's also close to a triangle made by the phi ratio, famously in the pyramid.
Okay.
So what happened?
So what? Yeah, that's a lot of connections.
Yeah. So what it is when you plug in, what I realized was these harmonic numbers have a male and a female to them. and one of them is multiples of 9 doubled to make it harmonic, because 9's an odd number. Double it, you get a harmonic. One of them is multiples of 3 times 9. The other one's 4 times 9. 3 times 9 is the masculine, 4 times 9 is the feminine. I discovered this because I found the Pythagorean right angled triangle everywhere, and the Egyptians had used this, called one side Osiris, the other side Isis, and the hypotenuse, the 5 side, is Horus. So I'm like, well, there's a masculine and a feminine there, and they've labeled it out for me. So having realized, because I'd found something on these pillars, there was this masculine and feminine number, I plugged them into the 3, 4, 5 triangle and realized that 3, 4, 5 triangle, once you put these harmonic numbers in there, generates harmonic numbers. It's just a little machine for them. 5 and 7 are prime numbers and are discordant, really. You don't find 5 and 7 very often at all in these harmonic numbers. In fact, pretty never in the precessional numbers. But you plug the precessional numbers into the right angle, the 3, 4, 5 triangle, and you get, on the 5 side, you get harmonic numbers that are divisible by 5. And if you add the 3 and the 4 side together, you get these super harmonic numbers that are divisible by 7, like 50, 40 and 252, which was John Dee's favorite number, which is half of 50, 40. And so I'm like, oh, this is it. When you're learning all this stuff, and it's so confusing, and so in the end it's simple, but while you're doing it, it's complex. It's it messes your mind up, really. It's very difficult to understand
in the short term, but then in the long term, it's worth it.
Yeah, it's worth it. Like this week, it's worth it. So what I realized was, so also, by the way, in that 7 pattern, the 7/14 pattern, all the angles in there aren't in golden ratio. They're in something called golden trisection. So golden ratio's got 2 parts to it, a smaller to a larger. Golden trisection's got a smaller to a larger to an even larger.
But all the parts in the golden ratio to each other, do you mean?
Do you mean like a slightly different
618, 1.618, 2.618?
Something like that. I can't actually remember it. I'm about to write all my notes up about that, but they're like a year old. So the thing is that this pattern's everywhere, and it's all over ancient art. It describes the internal structure of the pyramids. It describes this as John Michel, who originally found a version of this pattern many years ago. He'd put it over the pyramid and goes, oh, look, it's the shape of the pyramid. He hadn't stellated it, though. He also put it over Stonehenge and found that it's over Stonehenge. Once I'd stellated it and added a few other bits in it, because I kind of discovered it by looking over I didn't actually discover it on the pillars. I discovered it years before, looking at tarot and other things and just connecting lines together. And because I could kind of tell there was a hidden geometry there. I didn't know it was all the same geometry. But yeah, and just a series of coincidences, I discovered this pattern. And it is literally everywhere.
This pattern here is the John Michel Earth
The John
Moon
Michel
thing.
pattern, yeah, which has 2, 3, 4, 5 triangles at the top. Yeah. So once you stellate that, the orientation of the stones at Stonehenge becomes obvious. The layout of the passages follow in the Great Pyramid follow it exactly, and it's in so many things. It's in the Vitruvian Man. It's that when you look at the Last Supper, the famous Da Vinci Last Supper, and like Jesus is off in one direction and John's off in another direction. It's clearly the pyramid angle that. So I was like, I'll slap that over it. Yeah, straight away. That's drawn to this pattern. Like, there's so many pieces of great art. I mean, I found it going up into the bloody 20th century that people were using it, in a secret way. So many artists. So
Jura, maybe? Jura is one for secret codes and angles.
Jura,
Melancholia.
Yeah, in Melancholia particularly, because that's Melancholia is Saturn. That's everything in that is to do with Saturn. So there's like a Saturn pattern. Yeah. So all the various ratios on this. Once you plug in the numbers that we got from the precession of the equinoxes, brings out the size of the Earth, the size of the Moon. I found on there's the size of Mars and Jupiter, but that's not to be talked about yet. Everything's on there. All these mathematical constants. This harmonic generator that's the 3, 4, 5 triangle, because all the triangles on there, all these things are very close to being that. I mean, within points of a degree close to being that angle. So what it is that this seven-sided pattern is it's like a universal harmonic generator stroke diagram of close enoughs of pretty much every single important mathematical constant and all these harmonic numbers. It's pretty effing wild.
So are we talking about a regular heptagon here, or
yes, it is. You got to think it's these people doing geometry though. It's a very imprecise art because you got a square and a compass and you're a human with a pencil, you know. So for them, there's degrees of it not being quite right. So there's a program called GeoGebra that allows you to do geometry and algebra together.
Mhm.
So I plotted out the pattern this week as perfectly as I could, even on that program. And the only discrepancy I got was that think of a 50p piece. There's a flat bit at the bottom, isn't there? The 50p piece is a heptagon. So there's a flat bit at the bottom. That flat bit was 0.1 bigger than all the rest of it. But apart from that, because it's supposed to be impossible to draw a perfect heptagon because it's an irrational number. The difference between the degrees on each point is an irrational number because it's an odd number.
But that's true for so many shapes with geometry. There's the version that we humans can manage, and then there's the perfect version somewhere in some sphere somewhere, you know, where we have no problems with irrational numbers and exactitude and everything. So that's fair enough.
I think through that observation, what these numbers are to the ancients are the first, after number itself, the first forays into materiality are these harmonics, which are built by the prime numbers. It's like there's primes and anti-primes. That's essentially what they are. That would be a more mathematical way of putting it, but there are these harmonics and these disharmonics.
That's kind of intriguing because the prime numbers don't really fit within these other harmonies that are basically basic multiples of 6 and 9 and 2. So then you have numbers like 7 and 17 and 31. So how did they fit?
Well, they don't because they aren't harmonic. So they don't fit. However, when you put them in the Pythagorean triangle, it will naturally generate numbers that are also harmonic with either 7 or 5. Mm-hmm. Some of them both. 50-40.
Okay. And so when you go to a number sort of like 25,920, you can see the connection to this axial precession cycle because it's a number of years. But what about something like 432, 432, or times 10, times 100, whatever. So a number like that, how would you explain the link to the natural world or to human creations?
Sorry, could you rephrase the question? I don't get quite well.
A number like 432, how like when you have 25,920, you can see the connection to a cycle in years, but 432 is not as easy to connect to a particular cycle in years, or how would you connect that?
In that great cycle, 432 is 2 months. There's an easy one for you. 432 is A in the Pythagorean tuning. It's middle A, and it's like the base note for the tuning. 432 is a number that I just said. There's another connection. Where else is 432? It is all over the place. I can't think right now, to be honest.
Oh no, I don't want to mean to put you on the spot, but it's just that it's interesting to see how that these numbers aren't just important because they're subdivisions or divisions of 25920, right? They have their own importance.
Well, for example, it's because these are all harmonic numbers. So I can't give you 432 out there in the planets, for example, the size of the planets, but I can give you half of it in the moon, which is 216,000 miles in diameter. So
that's amazing, actually, because that's exact for the equatorial. That is literally exact. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this isn't a very exact science. The pattern itself, and I said there's these triangles in there. They're all very similar: Euler's triangle, golden ratio triangle, 3, 4, 5 triangle. What it's getting at is there's these. They're all close. They're all very close, and it's showing the harmonies. The closer they are, the more harmonic they are.
Yeah.
So it in itself it acknowledges that. So what are the mathematical constants? Square root of 2, square root of 3, pi, all these different things. What are they? Well, they're essentially ways that you can take the number 1 or any other number, but let's say the number 1, and then multiply them by one of these constants. They're called constants because they don't change, and they're derivable from nature. Like the square root of 2 is just the diagonal of a square. So what it does is then multiply that one by a continuous amount. You're getting these exponential growths. So they are ways of expanding things.
Mm-hmm.
So now, because we're talking about numbers, so you got numbers, and then we've got these things that happen when the numbers interact, which are these expansion things. And from this, then we get the laws of physics and whatnot. It's literally, it sounds a bit muddled because it's still a little muddled in my head, but this is literally a science of the characters of numbers and how they relate with each other. The characters of numbers themselves being the fundamental thing in the universe. Science still acknowledges the fact that numbers are the language and fundamental thing.
Yeah, I mean, some physicists think that numbers literally are the universe, not just that they speak, that the language that's derived, but some physicists think that literally numbers are the stuff of the universe. Like Max Tegmark, he has a book on that.
So, I mean, where does this end? When you look at people's work like Robert Edward Grant, which I have a little problem with sometimes, but generally I think he's fantastic. It is literally, it's the language of the cosmos, and it's how things work. It's from these things.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Go on.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go on.
All right. He's looking at things like from this, and he found part of this answer was found in Shakespeare, which contains these same constants and these same secrets passed on by John Dee to Edward de Vere, who is Shakespeare. He is able to, basically, it shows you the patterns in numbers. Like he put numbers in a 24 wheel, and we just think one o'clock, and then a 24-hour clock, and then he just keeps going. Every extra cycle of 24, he's putting an extra wheel in there. That's from all this Shakespearean D work and the same work as I'm doing. And he literally found a list of prime numbers. Prime numbers are all considered impossible to predict. He's just literally found them all on a list because the interaction between, I think it's between 24 and 36. I don't want to go into too much because it would just confuse everyone and me. But through this is the patterns between the numbers become obvious, and from there we can see how the universe is built. I'll tell everybody at home, and you can do this yourself. One of the best ways to see the patterns in numbers, you can do it with the 10 times table. You just give them a digital root. All that means is that if you got two numbers, say 18, 1 and 8 equals 9. And when you do that to the 10 times table, you see that the numbers have a pattern. And when they get to the middle, that pattern reverses and goes to the end again. So why is that? And what digital routing does is give you a window into that, an easy viewable window into that pattern.
Okay. So you've gone from finding some mysterious symbols on some weird stones to maths and geometry and science.
Yes.
So
Yes.
did you expect that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I did, yeah. Because, like as I said at the beginning, these pillars were like a gift from the universe for me to study further, but also to have a place, have something to collect all my ideas together. You know, I'd found these things in various other places before. Lots of it in the tarot, some of it looking at medieval churches, some of it just sheer stupid luck. Just having a general interest in it all. I only
Yeah.
decoded the Wheel of Fortune stuff.
So
And
tell me
this
more about
stuff
the
is,
Wheel of Fortune as well, because you haven't said as much about that.
oh, the whole thing, that Wheel of Precession is essentially the Wheel of Fortune. The Wheel of
Okay.
Fortune is the sky is turning around you. So, yeah, well, in the corner of that Wheel of Fortune was the 72. So that's the processional day is 72. So
Yeah.
it's calling in all this stuff. And again, I said it was 14. There's 14 segments around the outside, 7 in the middle, which get you to draw this pattern again, which has all this stuff in there. So it
Yeah.
all comes round
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
Wheel of
Literally,
Fortune.
the importance of the circle. Yeah. Yeah. And so, like, do you think that it's a mix of people somehow long ago mapping their favorite numbers onto the universe through their measuring systems, and
No.
then finding these various numerical connections just through the natural cycles? For example, the sun and the moon and the number 4, something like that.
Yeah. So here's how I think. I think the way we do maths now is very clinical. The way maths would have been done then would have been very a pebble from one thing and drop it in this hole kind of counting.
Uh-huh.
So they would have seen the patterns in numbers much more than we would. We're writing down literal symbols of numbers. They've got the numbers in front of them. So I think and having to divide by certain things and naturally looking for numbers that coincide, those are harmonics. Look, they can get this stuff from watching the planets as they move, the orbits of certain planets and the speed they take. That's got these numbers in there. So it is all
Oh
around
yeah,
us. It
yeah,
tends to be up there. It tends to be up there more than it's down here. Down here is a bit more
yeah,
metaphysical.
yeah.
Up there, it's a bit more solid. I mean, these numbers become a bit more solid. So, excuse me, I need to go.
Yeah, I
So they're
actually found
everywhere.
it
It's in
interesting.
time. It's in time.
Yeah,
The
it's all
number
about
of
time.
seconds in a day, hours in a day.
Yeah.
It's all
But
it's
that's
all
but
here anyway.
those are human divisions.
They're
Are they
not.
not?
That's the point. They're not. No, they aren't. They're literally here already. I used to think that myself, but once you study all this stuff, the first thing it suggests is that time. It's okay. We might have. I don't even think the decimal system's an accident, and the fact that we've got a decimal system with kind of a base 12 thing attached to it. So I don't think that's it. I think we've noticed the celestial mechanics, and that hugely infers the counting systems that we use. I mean, it doesn't hugely infer it. It tells you to use these counting systems.
But could we not have had a day of 26 hours or
We don't.
28?
We, I suppose we could have done. There were different calendars. Usually, like you had like 364-day calendars and things like that, 360-day calendars. But that's not what happens out there. So it doesn't matter.
So that's
So
why I'm
okay,
asking. Just some of the things I feel we're transposing. So we know about these axial precession, and then maybe we're using some of these numbers like 360 and 72 then to then apply them to the day, the week, the month, the different
they
times.
do apply. They do apply, and they all apply so well. They all fit into each other in a harmonic glory bukake. Do you know what I mean?
But I
Sorry.
want to get back to this. I would have thought that that's because there was a couple of Newtons way back that figured it out and decided to use the numbers that they found already present in nature and apply them to other bits and pieces in nature.
I thought the same, but it's pretty evident on having written a book on it that it just is. It's well, like, is it 864? So how many seconds in a day? Is it 864? I'm going to look it up. 86400. What's the size of the sun? 864,000.
86400
You know what I mean?
miles diameter.
Yeah.
But, yes, but that's because somebody created the mile, right? Somebody invented the
Well,
mile.
this is what I was on this morning. So I'm like, well, hang on a minute, right? If these ancient measurement systems work to this, and I found lots with the qubit this morning as well, but if these ancient measurement systems apply, what the hell is the root of the inch, right? What's the root of it? So I found it was 3 barley corns. 3 dried barley corns from the middle of a shaft of wheat, dried, laid end to end, is an inch. So it's been known throughout time that barley corns are pretty stable things, but not exactly stable.
But is
But you
that
have something to
the
say?
whole story? Because that's like saying, oh, the foot is about a human foot. It's not. It's just that it's about the size of a human foot. The inch is about the size of 3 barley corns. But the root, I would say, is it's a division of the equatorial circumference by 43200 and the number of days in a year.
So also, so I agree. However, I was like, well, they need to be able to actually have a distance as well. You know, like what does it look like? What, you know, because that's kind of recursive, isn't it? Using one measure to get another measure. You can't do that, if you get me.
You can start with the inch.
What do you start with?
Right? Start with the
Yeah.
with the inch.
So I'm like, well, surely they're using something up there that moves at a regular rate. And I thought, first of all, I thought Saturn. What speed would Saturn move? Well, Saturn moves like 1 degree a year, so you're not going to notice it moving at all in the night sky. It's going to move at the same rate as everything else moves, which is about 15 degrees per hour. So then I'm like, well, hang on a minute, what is that? It turns out that it moves, that the stars or the sun move about 3 inches per hour. So if you stood there, measured where the sun was, waited 20 minutes, or a shadow, waited 20 minutes, you'd have an inch.
But that's very dependent on the observer and where you're measuring
Yeah,
from.
yeah. Well, you'd take all this, and it's not much, is it? You'd have to, like, where are you on the equator in regards to the equator and that? Latitude.
But
And what time of day is it?
Yeah.
Excuse me?
No, I take your point. I think that does work up to a point, but it's just that there are some things that are definitely very predictable, and that's, for example, the length of a day. I mean, there are different days. There's the tropical and there's the sidereal years and everything. That's fair enough. 364 days, 365 days, 366. There are all these kinds of divisions, but they don't change very much over time. So that's a great place to start if you want to basically figure out what an inch is or design an inch.
Yeah, I agree. But how then do you get the size of the inch at the end of it? It might all be in ratio and proportion to these time factors, but how do you then get a material?
Well, I think the inch is super interesting because in megalithic sites and Giza, it seems to represent 1 day. So that when you have a length of so many inches, you can translate it as so many days or sometimes so many years. So that the fact that it would be linked perhaps to a division of the equatorial circumference is really interesting because that's exactly the bit that turns once every 24 hours or sidereal equivalent. So I think that would make sense. That kind of fits, right? I know the Earth
I totally
kind
agree.
of
But then how do you then get that size?
Okay, so assuming that I'm kind of some assistant of some like Newton from 10,000 years ago, I would suggest that somebody measure the Earth pretty precisely somehow, and then with some other units that we have no particular emotional connection to, and then divide that circumference by the number of days in a year, and some kind of multiple of 4320 because it's the super important number.
So I think that is what it is. That's clearly, you are correct when it is. I just have a problem with this guy that's going measuring the size of the Earth. How do you do that?
Don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know, but it was done. It has to have been done. Like, it has to have been. Because how does everything fit? Like the mile as well. The mile fits so well. Like, you have 86,400 miles in the diameter of the sun, 1080 miles exactly in the equatorial radius of the moon, and then you have a particular number of miles in the equatorial circumference of the Earth. That is also mind-blowing. It's to do with pi and stuff, and like, somebody designed that, right?
To my mind, it's observations and inferences, because all these numbers are harmonic, and you can kind of look at so many factors around a phenomena, and then infer from the things around it and the juxtaposition of all these harmonies what that is. Because I mean, look, if I've found this pattern used 40,000 years ago, I'm adamant about it and have proof. So how would they know the size of the Earth and the size of the moon? You know what I mean? It's just,
I don't know, but there were
for me, it's literally what you said. How they construct the inch is the same as how they've figured out all these other things. This inferences from time things to space things to. I don't have an ultimate answer, but
it has to have been done, right? I mean,
yes.
These connections are there, and I totally agree with you there.
Does it have to have been done? You mean the Earth has been measured? Is that what you're saying? That has to have been done.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I agree. That's the only thing I'm going to disagree with. I'm not sure if it had. I think they inferred it from looking at all these other physical laws around these harmonics.
Okay, maybe.
Because it's all time stuff.
I like to think that it was measured accurately, because so many units of measure fit particularly precisely as so many divisions of a degree of longitude or latitude, or so many divisions of the polar circumference or equatorial circumference. And so because of that, like, there's no question that the Earth was measured. Having said that, I don't know how it was done. I don't know.
Okay, let's say for a second a guy got in a boat and sailed around the world and took out of his boat and then walked across land. You know, let's say that was true for a minute.
Okay.
How did they measure the moon?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, but they did because it's particular number of miles, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't have a firm answer for you, but I think again that all these time numbers, these more metaphysical versions of it, not the space ones, but they are time space numbers, but the ones particularly related to time, I think they're looking at those and somehow inferring one thing to another, and then in a big jumble, they've by comparing everything, they've gone, oh look, probably something like, oh look, the 3-4-5 triangle tells us how to do everything. I'm pretty sure that 3-4-5 triangles something like a pixel for the basic structure of the universe. Like
I would agree with you that it's there at Giza, it's there at like various megalithic sites in the Kuno rectangle and all this, and it's obviously important to the Pythagoreans. So what the symbolism is and what the use of it is, I think you've had a really good strong theory. I think that really works. But then I think that there's a combination of people mapping onto nature or the natural world their favorite numbers, but also deriving from them. And then even if you think that the sun and the moon look like the same size to us in the sky, roughly, and then but the distance and the size difference is just so that they happen to compensate for each other so that they look the same to us, even though they're very different sizes and distances. And there are all sorts of other weird natural coincidences as well. I found one with 28, which really surprised me, because basically if you were to multiply the number of Earth years that are in each of the traditional 7 planets orbits. So that includes the moon and then the sun, kind of. So basically, the 5 planets plus precession plus the metonic cycle, that is equivalent to 10,000 divided by 28. Like things like that, that kind of shouldn't be true, but it works. And then you have that number 28 again. We're back to the beginning.
Yep.
Yeah.
Isn't 28 7 numbers? Yes, it's 7 divisible by 7. There's lots of 7s
Back
in all
to
this.
14 rather, that you were talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely there are some very strange coincidences. And I think it's amazing that you found so many symbols then that you can relate to the maths and to the science.
I mean, some very simple ones are kind of my favorites. I mentioned IHS. There's also INRI, which is above Jesus. You know, when he's on the cross, it says, yeah, Jesu Nazarene Rex Judea, Jesus of Nazareth, King Jews. A lot of people say that's esoteric formula for the 4 elements in Hebrew, that the 4 elements start with those letters. So I put it in gematria, and it turned out to be 25,920 again. Well, you know, he's a pole god, isn't he? And you know, he's literally, there's lots of time things going on with
That's
Jesus.
right. Yes, it's kind of like a vertical axis, isn't it? It's sort of a
It's
like
the
a
tree of life. Yeah,
tree of
he's in the
life.
tree. Yeah, the tree of life is the axis mundi. Yeah.
Yes.
So it's all the same stuff again.
Yeah. And when you looked into the Mithraic religions, what did you think of the other sort of the main characters, sort of Sol Invictus? Did you have any thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, the main mystery in Mithraism is the precession of the equinoxes. That seems to be the main mystery that they're getting across.
Mm-hmm.
What did I think of all the extra characters? As in, like, what roles do they have to play?
No, I just mean like in terms of, it's like, I think it's maybe easy to think of it as like a cult of the sun, but it's not about that, is it? It's about something that's much stronger than the sun.
It's like, so Mithras is like the hypercosmic sun, is this Saturnian black sun character. The hypercosmic sun, or the black sun, is the sun behind the sun. We call it something like the ether or the 0 point field or something like that. It's the source point of the energy for the universe, which is the thing we've been talking about this whole time, which is this life force realm that suddenly imbues the cosmos with number. And numbers are the frequency of the energy. You know, as the undulations of this life serpent happen, bloop bloop number, and there's these calls wrapped round harmonics.
Everything
It's
is
this kind of an
vibration,
idea.
they used to say in ancient Greece.
Yeah. So yeah, Mithras is this kind of hypercosmic sun idea. I mean, it should be said though that there's something else going on as well as this, to do with this life force that's in this secret science, and that is, you'd know it as Kundalini yoga, Qigong, the force, all these other things, because we're dealing with that life force. They are also, so for example, the main time deity in there, one of the best examples of symbolic formula is in this god Aeon, who I mentioned right at the beginning.
Yeah.
Who's this time god. He's got a serpent wrapped around his body that comes over the back of his head and sits there like a Uraeus serpent. He's got 4 wings. He's got the signs of the zodiac over his body. He's got a lion's head. So I've said the eagle's wings. He's got the bull on him. He's basically a sphinx, right? So the sphinx is all time, all, you know, it's the 4 seasons of time all at once. His keys off in that direction. So it's showing you he's, for example, so obviously the lion, bull, eagle, and man are the 4 cycles of this larger time, the 4 seasons of man as well, you could call it. But also the lion is the moment. He's the devouring nature of the moment. You know, every moment devours the next moment. Plus, you got the serpent, which is cyclical time, like we already discussed. Draco being cyclical time.
Mm-hmm.
So the serpent's cyclical time, winding up his body. So this is like the ecliptic and things like that. These cycles of time. However, with that said, this is also a symbol of the Kundalini. I'll call it Kundalini for me, but this life force serpent. That serpent is the life force. Time is the life force moving into mortality.
Mm-hmm.
It moves through us in the same way. When you look at a lot of these systems, for example, Kundalini, when you add up all the chakra numbers, you end up at 144, which is one of these precessional numbers. In Qigong, even in Tai Chi, you've got the sets of moves are like 108. How many meridians in the body? 72. It's all these same numbers repeated over and over again.
Yeah.
And what the Mithrais were doing is, by trying to get to this hypercosmic sun, where you're trying to enter into a kind of meditative state whereby you are able to access this immortal realm, i.e., time's not there anymore, and you're able to access information and more energy to bring it back with you. It was said that you could ask Mithras a question when you got there. They'd have this big ritual where they're doing weird breathing, they're clearly having strange potions, and they're going. I mean, even doing that, I feel slightly crazy. So they're going to this place. Okay, confession time. I'm in my early 30s, and having exhausted normal science trying to find out how the universe is constructed of music, I saw a Terence McKenna thing where he was saying that these ayahuasca shaman in Peru were singing Icaros, these little songs that they sing, and they could see the songs they're singing. I'm like, whoa, that sounds like something I could, find out about. But I'd been very poorly at that time when I'm doing this. I was just recovering. I hadn't basically eaten in about 3 months. So I was very thin. I'd eaten bits, but not a lot. And as I'm recovering, I'm like, it was this. I couldn't go and get ayahuasca. I didn't live in Peru, but where I live, around the back of my mother's house, is the Pennines, and on the Pennines grows lots of magic mushrooms. Mithras is a magic mushroom god. Clearly, I mean, so unequivocally, Mithras is a magic mushroom god. I took the mushrooms, and everything that I've said to you today was, I had a download from doing the mushrooms. Everything, including this energy work stuff, happened in one night, and it took me all these years to decode what happened in that night. From one point when I'd kind of snapped out of the biggest part of the trip, and I'd had a female voice talking to me earlier, and I suddenly had a male voice talking to me. Not in so much words, but like telepathy. Whereas the female voice sounded like a voice in my head. The male voice just was like the words arrived in my head, and they had a masculine charge to them. And I saw in front of me, with my eyes open, like a 3D wireframe that, when you're constructing 3D objects on a computer, sometimes you get the wireframe of it and it's not filled in.
Oh yeah.
Like a 3D wireframe of something that looked like a mix between the Giza Plateau and the complexes in South America with the pyramids on there. There was one that pointed up and one that pointed down. They were a mirror symmetry of each other with pyramids on there. Bearing in mind, I find out all these patterns for pyramids. And this voice said to me, you, as in me, have to build the Temple of Solomon, right? Among many other things. And just before that had happened, I'd snapped out of a very, very deep, eyes closed trance while I'm getting lots of information. And as I stood up, I had flashes of Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, all these god men. And then at my, do you know what the Dantian is? At my Svadhisthana chakra, the space just under my belly button, that chakra point there, a 2-dimensional stained glass window, as I'm opening my eyes and standing up and going, what the F happened to me? This 2-dimensional stained glass burst open from that point there. It was as much of a feeling as it was a visual, and then it extended to the edge of the universe. And then I've turned around and seen this pyramid structured thing, and God, I don't really believe it, told me that I needed to build Solomon's Temple. When you look into Solomon's Temple, as I have on the show I do in America, it's all energy work, and obviously the Temple of Solomon is built to these numbers and proportions. In fact, Isaac Newton drew a plan of Solomon's Temple that was clearly done to that pattern, that hexagram pattern.
It's a mad story you're telling me here. But...
I know it sounds unbelievable, but that's why I didn't tell you straight away. But that's the truth, and lots more things happened in there that have just taken years to decompress. So basically, what it looks like is, if I'm telling my truth, if not the provable truth, these ancient religions, by doing these strange potions and doing this maths, were able to access what we would call the Akasha now and bring information back about the structure of the universe. And this is information about the structure of the universe. And also, you know, the whole energy arts things, charging up your body with energy, your natural energies. So you got an excess. A lot of the higher mystics are going, yeah, that's how we're getting there. We don't need the mushrooms or whatever anymore. That's how we're getting to these places.
Phil mentioned something about
those systems. Sorry, wherever you find those systems, you will find these numbers, and you'll find the serpents. It's the serpent knowledge. Hence, the serpent winding up Aeon, the time god, and being the Uraeus serpent on the forehead over the third eye.
And so to go back to Saturn, is he just? I mean, obviously he's Kronos, he's the god of time, but what's the role then of the other gods like Jupiter, Mercury? Are they all kind of like different facets of the same energy that's linked to the Kundalini, that's linked to precession?
Yes. So it's a series of emanations to that philosophy of number that we've talked about. So like 1 is a singular unit and the base of all number. 2 is like a polarization. 3 is like 1 and 2 having a little chat, and there's the system of the chat itself becomes a third thing. That makes them both pregnant with a fourth thing. The pregnancy is information, and the fourth thing resets. It's the Pythagorean tetractys. It's all, there's a whole philosophy to number. When you examine the polarities and dualities of number, that's what you get. So what are the planets? Saturn is the outermost, the skin, the alpha and omega. What if you're coming in, it's the first thing. If you're leaving, it's the last thing. If you get me. So there's your alpha and omega, the first and last letters of the Greek alphabet. Time, laws of physics, but it's like the possibility of time. Jupiter as a, so Saturn in these old philosophies is contraction. Jupiter is expansion. What Jupiter is then the movement of the bodies within the set that Saturn's caused. If he's a skin, we've got a set of numbers within there. Jupiter's the movement of those numbers, the expansion and contraction within that set of laws. By the way, set literally comes from the Egyptian, the word set comes from the Egyptian god Set, who is Saturn. It's a set of things.
Okay.
Then, so those are the two basic properties of the life force, contraction and expansion. Then you've got Mars and Venus as another coupled pair. These are that same life force, but in you and I, your Venus, I'm Mars. I mean, in the literal sense of masculine and feminine. Mars and Venus are like yin and yang. They're always codependent on each other. It's like Venus means desire, and Mars is more like a passion. So it's like I want this thing, and then Mars is the drive to get it. Venus is the feminine cup. I want this. I need this thing. I need to receive, feminine, receptive. Then we got the masculine, active, that goes out and gets the thing. I want this thing I need this thing. Well, then I'll go and get this thing. So there's a recognition of energy needed, and then using of energy that you have to go and get more energy. Makes sense? Sun and the moon are the same. Those are two polar opposites. Those are a bit more metaphysical than Mars and Venus. They are a couple of, they're like the exemplars of mind would be a good one. So the sun would be the conscious mind, the moon would be the subconscious mind. In fact, within psychology and the astrology and all these other things, that is what they symbolize. So they're these coupled polar opposites that chain down being until you arrive here at the Earth. Mercury is the one that is kind of the intermediate between them all. That, you know, he's the medium.
Yeah.
So what it's depicting is a polarized, an increasingly heavy, increasingly materialistic ladder down these polarizations. If you get me.
Which, and of course, you can relate these traditional 7 planets to the chakras and the life force, and you can see these in lots of different historical images. But I wonder if there's a case to be made for whatever it is that's at the root of precession being somehow over and above literally everything else. And I'm just reminded of Timaeus, because in Plato's Timaeus, when he describes creation, he says on the one hand that the demiurge makes out of chaos, he creates order, and on the one hand he's got the circle of the fixed stars going in one direction, and then the circle of the others. So basically you've got the sun and the moon and the 5 traditional planets going in the other direction, but they're separate. And so it's as if, well, the demiurge itself, or the creator in whatever religion is obviously going to be separate in some sense. But I'm also thinking of, do you know the zodiac man that you see sometimes in medieval images? It's like a man, and then it's kind of like a little bit like the chakras, but instead of that, it's constellations all the way down the middle. And it's
this is Ion.
It's
the same character.
It's a personification almost of some kind of processional force. So what do you think about all that?
He is that myth great god Ion that we already described. He is literally the embodiment of time and the life force.
Mm-hmm.
I have a little gap in my knowledge between, and it's something that I've got one last chapter to write in my book, and I hope to come to an answer by the end of it. But that is like, where are these people watching the life force as it comes from that eternal realm, comes through that platonic realm of ideals, then comes through the sphere of stars, then comes through the 7 planets, then comes through our bodies, and it's here.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see why they'd use the precessional numbers, these harmonic numbers, to describe, well, they describe themselves. I can see where the harmonic numbers are in the cosmos, but in the macrocosm, I can't see them here. You know, the Buddhists might talk about 144 nadi in the body, or whatever it is, but I've failed to see it here, other than the actual connection that that's the life force in movement, and here's the life force in movement, some like ancient animistic idea. But here's a point, actually, I was thinking the other day. I think last time we talked, we distinguished like animism, and then you get the early pantheons and all these ways of looking at it, and then you get monotheism. I've come to think, no, actually, animism never went away, and the pantheism never went away either. It's always been the same system, as far as I can see. The life force is God. The pantheon is the way that God moves through the universe. You know, to the Egyptians, they always had Atum at the beginning. It wasn't always Ra and Osiris and all these guys. You know, they say, well, Atum's at the beginning, then we get the pantheon. You know, the Hebrews are like, we've got Yahweh at the back of it, and then we got the angels. The animists were just like, well, the life force is God. Like the Taoists are somewhat animists.
Yeah.
They've just got the life force. That is God. That is the pantheon. That is, you know, it's just the root, the God, sorry, the pantheon and the animistic life force. It's just the path. It's all, that's the route the life force takes.
I think that's a view you can arrive at if you're that way inclined, if you're Spinoza or something, or yourself. But I think that people like Augustine would have a really problem with that kind of viewpoint, because from a moral point of view, if you kill an animal, are you killing God?
Yes.
You know, you can't do that. You can't do that for Augustine. You like if you like, you cannot say that God is in everything, because we eat meat and we eat plants, and you cannot cut a tree and you cannot eat an animal if you believe God is in it, which is obviously the reason why many people in India are vegetarian. It makes total sense. But for Augustine, from a moral point of view, and I'm just using him to represent, you know, the Christian worldview, it's very important to take away, to extract God from the world that we're living in. These are divine creations, but God is not present in that world. He's present in, if you're Catholic, in the little piece of bread in the transubstantiation, but that is very specific, and that's within the confines of a church. But from a moral point of view, Augustine would be horrified. Well, he was horrified by animism.
Well, Augustine, you are God also, and just because of your doctrine doesn't mean that that's not true.
Well,
your doctrine is one based on guilt, and your doctrine is based on guilt and a misrepresentation of what the fall of man actually means. The fall of man is your journey from that ethereal realm, that ephemeral realm, down to here. There's your fall. It's not Adam and Eve eating an apple. So basically, you are God. Yes, you are also God, devouring God. We know this in the serpent, the symbol of the Ouroboros serpent, that it is the universe devours itself.
I think of all people, I don't know why I picked Augustine, but he didn't start out as a Catholic or a Christian. He started out as a Manichae. So I think he would have grown up with those ideas or similar ideas. But for the Christians, I think it's very important for the religion that they are, I'm not religious in that way myself, but I'm just saying that you extract God from nature. And that is why then people like Spinoza, and this is obviously different religion, he was Jewish, but would be expelled from the community because those views are just not acceptable. And so for us to say that nature is divine is a blasphemy in a traditional Christian view. And that is maybe why we are where we are in terms of the natural world, because there's nothing in the monotheism that don't allow us to destroy nature, because it's God isn't in it.
The Christian monotheism,
Indian philosophies, the Hopi, whatever.
Yeah, I agree. But that's a lot to do with the ambitions of man, though, as well, changing doctrines, altering this and that to fit an age of conquest, which is what those years were.
Yeah, well, we didn't get over to talking about ego too much today. We can talk about the meaning of life next time, and how ego affects that. But maybe we should leave it here, because we've actually been chatting for absolutely ages, which was amazing. Time flew by. It was absolutely fantastic chat. But thank you, Ryan. That was really amazing. So
yes,
thank you.
Welcome. It was fun to be here and have a good chat to you. Like you said last time, it's nice to talk to somebody that actually knows something about these things. And actually have a discussion rather than be a lecture.
I guess you've arrived from one angle and I've arrived from another angle, and it's really interesting to see how many things, because what blew my mind the last time was that all these things I just figured out myself, you already knew.
I don't have children, so I've got a bit more time than you do. But
no.
Yeah, I don't know what to say. I've just got the brain for it, and because of that part of me that allows some silly ideas in, like I'll go and run to the hills around the back of my mother's, take some mushrooms because some guys in Peru can see sound. I didn't know what was coming after that. I didn't know I was going to have this wild thing and a download of all this information.
It's pretty
wild. I think if I've got an advantage, just for some people, I'm willing to go to areas that they aren't, the normal person, as you are clearly as well, that the average person won't go to. So, and think some thoughts that maybe the average person wouldn't.
Yeah, I guess there's a kind of a freedom there. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's the freedom to allow. Here's an animistic thought for you. It's the freedom to allow the universe in to do its work on you, because so many of my discoveries have been, well, for example, right, night before last, I'd figured out that those triangles that we were talking about, these angular triangles, the Euler triangle, 3, 4, 5, the angle of that precession, all these things. I'm like, well, why is that triangle so close to that one of the stellations from the heptagon? Like, why the 7-sided shape? Why?
Yeah.
And it was like probably about 3 o'clock in the morning. I'd been literally writing from about 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. It was like I was absolutely exhausted and going slightly crackers. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I just typed in something that I felt like watching for 10 minutes before I went to sleep.
And the answer was there, right?
The answer was there. It was Robert Edward Grant. He'd taken all the constants, divided them by 360 so he could get them on a wheel. And it turns out all the constants are within like a very small area amount of all the points on a 7-sided shape. So wherever you find a point, you'll find the constants pretty much. And it was like, what a bizarre thing to question to ask. I got the answer straight away.
Yeah.
And this happens all the time. It happens. Those pillars were a bloody miracle, really. That everything I've needed, the universe has given me. Apart from money or love, it's given me.
Well, that's because you didn't want them, maybe.
I still want money and love, though.
Maybe finish your book first, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, finish the book. I'll get money and love.
Yeah, well, best of luck with finishing the book. So it's tough. It's tough work, but well done and good luck with it. So
thank you. Good luck with your website.
Ryan. Thanks a million.
We need to say at the end, if anyone wants to find my stuff, come and find me on YouTube, Ryan7 Secret Science.
Yes.
And also in person, if you can find out where I live.
Well, that would be kind of weird, right?
Yeah, that's why I didn't tell anyone where I live. I'm like, you got to come and stalk. If you want to be a stalker, you've got to come and stalk.
Have a look at all Ryan's videos. Amazing dialogues, conversations, presentations. Yeah, have a look at all the work he's done. It's really good. Really, really good.
Thank you.
So, and inspirational.
Oh, great. Oh, fantastic. Oh, we'll talk again soon at some point.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ryan. Take care.